I never imagined I'd feel this way. Not about my own son, and certainly not at this stage of life. My name is Elena, I'm 45 years old, and I've been divorced for a decade. The years since have shaped me into someone both strong and quietly lonely. I work as a yoga instructor at a local fitness club, and most people would say I look younger than my age. Slim, toned, flexible, and still catching occasional glances that remind me I haven't faded completely into invisibility. My son Daniel is 22. He lives with me while finishing university, saving up while working part-time at a bookstore downtown. He's everything I once hoped he would become. Intelligent, thoughtful, handsome in a subtle, quiet kind of way. And he's in love. She's been in his life for a year now. Mia. Blonde, sweet, the kind of girl mothers are supposed to be thrilled about. And maybe I should be. But every time she walks into our home, her perfume trailing in the air, and curls bouncing as she laughs at something Daniel says, I feel something uncomfortable stir in my chest. Took me months to name it. Envy. Not of her youth or her carefree smile, or even her long legs. But of what she has that I used to. Daniel's attention. His warmth. The way he lights up when she texts him, or how he hurries out of the house when she's waiting. The feeling is shameful. I try to smother it with yoga, deep breathing, late-night herbal tea. But it's still there, persistent and whispering. Last night was especially difficult. I was folding laundry when I heard them laughing in his room. Her laugh rang like bells. High, melodic, perfectly placed. I stood at the door to my room, a sweater in my hands, and for a moment I didn't move. Just listened. That laughter belonged to someone who felt safe, adored. I used to be that person for him before he needed someone else more. I hate how that thought makes my throat tighten. That evening, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on the balcony, watching the moonlight spill over the patio tiles. Daniel joined me a little later, barefoot and relaxed. Mia had left, and he looked more like the boy I used to tuck in at night. We sat in silence, the kind that lingers comfortably between people who've known each other their entire lives. "You okay, Mom?" he asked, glancing over. I smiled too quickly. "Just tired. Long day. You're doing too much." His voice was warm, sincere. "You should take time for yourself. Maybe go on a trip or something." I let out a soft laugh. "And go where? I barely remember how to plan something for just me." He shifted closer, resting his arm along the back of the bench, not touching me but close enough that I felt his presence. He always had this calming effect, ever since he was little. Just being near him felt like home. You're allowed to have a life outside of work and laundry, you know. I turned to look at him then. His face was half lit by the pale glow of the porch light. There was something in his expression, a depth, a sincerity that made my heart clench. He looked so much like his father when he was young, before the bitterness of our marriage took its toll. "You've grown up so much," I whispered, more to myself than to him. He smiled. "Yeah, you say that a lot lately." 'Cause I noticed it more lately. The way his shoulders had broadened. The way he moved with ease and confidence. The faint stubble that shadowed his jaw every evening. He wasn't my little boy anymore. And maybe that was the problem. I excused myself not long after, blaming the hour, the wine, the long day. But the truth was, I needed space. From him, from myself, from the thoughts I wasn't supposed to have. As I lay in bed that night, I stared at the ceiling and tried to remember the last time I had truly been touched. Not casually, not in passing, but touched in a way that made me feel seen, desired. I couldn't remember. The clock ticked past midnight, and from the hallway, I heard Daniel's soft footsteps as he moved to the kitchen, likely for water. That familiar rhythm, the same as when he was 16 and too tall for his bunk bed, pulled at something deep inside me. Memory. Longing. Something I shouldn't name. But even as I closed my eyes and willed sleep to take me, I knew it was still there. The shadow of a feeling I had no right to feel. The morning sun filtered through the sheer curtains, casting soft gold across the hardwood floor of my bedroom. I woke before my alarm as I often did, my body too trained by routine to allow for rest when it needed it most. I stretched, felt the quiet pop of my joints, and padded barefoot to the kitchen. The house was silent. Daniel had already left for class or to meet Mia, most likely the latter. I told myself that was fine, that I preferred the quiet. But as I sipped my coffee, standing by the window that overlooked our garden, a small ache bloomed beneath my ribs. It had always been the two of us. After the divorce, Daniel was my anchor, my reason. When he was young, he used to crawl into my bed after nightmares, his small body curling into mine as if I were the safest place in the world. Now he curled around someone else in his sleep. I should be happy for him. And in some ways I was. He deserved love, connection, everything I had given up hoping for. But the space he once filled beside me now felt like a wound, subtle, hidden, but persistent. That afternoon I taught my usual yoga class at the club. My body moved with practiced ease through the flow, my voice calm as I guided the students through poses. But inside I wasn't calm. I was distracted, caught in a strange loop of memory and imagination. After class, I lingered in the empty studio, seated in lotus position, staring at the mirrored wall. My reflection looked back, composed, graceful, poised. I traced the curve of my jaw with my eyes, the faint lines near my mouth, the toned arms I'd worked so hard to maintain. I looked good. I knew that. But it had been so long since someone else had looked at me that way. Truly looked. I got home to find Daniel in the kitchen, barefoot and relaxed, a skillet sizzling on the stove. "You're home early," I said, surprised. He turned with a grin. "Mia's working late, so I figured I'd cook dinner." He was wearing that old faded gray t-shirt I loved, the one that clung just slightly to his shoulders. His hair was still damp from a shower, and there was a lightness in his mood that made the room feel warmer. "Smells good," I said, setting down my bag. "It's your favorite," he added, over his shoulder. "Lemon herb chicken." That small gesture hit harder than it should have. He still remembered. We ate together, just the two of us, like we used to before Mia became a permanent fixture in his evenings. Conversation flowed easily. Updates about work, school, snippets of daily life. But underneath it all, I felt that same undercurrent pulling at me deeper and deeper. After dinner, we moved to the living room. He flopped down on the couch and patted the cushion beside him, just like he did when he was little. "Watch something with me?" he asked. I hesitated. But then I sat down, tucking one leg beneath me. We watched a movie he loved, one I barely followed because I was too aware of everything else. The way his arm rested behind me on the couch. The occasional sideways glance when he thought I wasn't looking. The warmth of his laughter. I used to be his world. I used to be the center of everything. Now I was trying not to get pulled into orbit again. Halfway through the movie, I reached for the blanket draped over the armrest and pulled it over us. It was instinct, comfort, habit. But as the edge of the fabric brushed his arm, Daniel shifted slightly closer. Neither of us spoke. We stayed like that for a long time. Quiet. Then he turned to me. "You've seemed different lately," he said softly. "Everything okay?" I nodded too quickly. "Just tired. Busy." His eyes searched mine. "You're not seeing anyone, are you?" The question surprised me. I blinked. "No. Why?" He shrugged, his gaze flicking down for a moment before returning to mine. "I don't know. You're beautiful. It just surprises me, that's all." The compliment hit harder than I expected. I smiled gently and said nothing. But my heart beat louder in the silence between us. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about his words. "You're beautiful." It wasn't just what he said, it was how he said it. with the kind of quiet reverence I hadn't heard in years. Not since before his father and I stopped seeing each other as anything more than obligations. I closed my eyes and pulled the blanket tighter around me, wondering if maybe, just maybe, I wasn't imagining it. That subtle shift in the air. That flicker of something unspoken. It was late. The kind of late where the house feels suspended in stillness, where each creak of the wooden floor and whisper of wind outside becomes a sound too loud. I had gone to bed early, or at least pretended to. In truth, I just wanted to be alone with my thoughts, to distance myself from the tangle of feelings that had been winding tighter each day. I had just turned off the bedside lamp when I heard the soft click of the front door. Daniel was home. I waited for the sound of him in the kitchen, maybe the opening of the fridge or the rustle of snack wrappers. His usual rituals after seeing Mia. But there was nothing. Only footsteps, slow and heavy, climbing the stairs. And then, a knock. Hesitant. "Come in," I said gently. The door opened, and he stood there, half shadowed by the hallway light. His shoulders slumped, hands stuffed into his pockets. His eyes were red. He didn't say a word. Instead, he walked across the room and, without warning, sank to his knees beside the bed. Then he leaned forward, pressing his forehead into my stomach like he used to when he was little and the world had been too much. My heart cracked open. I placed a hand on the back of his head instinctively, my fingers slipping into his hair. His breath hitched against me. "She broke up with me," he whispered. "Or she wanted to." I could see it in her eyes. I didn't even wait for her to say it. I just left. I exhaled slowly, my other hand finding his shoulder. "I'm so sorry, baby." He shook his head, his face still pressed against me. I thought it would hurt more. But the worst part is, I'm not even surprised. I didn't know what to say. He was unraveling, and I could feel every piece of his heart breaking as if it were my own. I stroked his hair slowly, gently, and the motion seemed to ground him. "You gave her everything you could," I said softly. "That's all you could do." He stayed there a long time, breathing unevenly, wrapped in the quiet rhythm of my hand moving through his hair, along his neck, down the slope of his back. It was a comfort I hadn't given him in years, at least not like this, not as a man. And he wasn't a boy anymore. When he finally lifted his head, his eyes found mine. The room was dim, the only light a faint amber glow from the hallway. But I saw everything in his gaze. Grief, confusion, and something else I wasn't ready to name. "I didn't know where else to go," he said, his voice hoarse. "You're always safe here," I murmured. "Always." His eyes dropped to my lips for just a moment. It was fleeting, but I noticed. And before I could even fully understand what was happening, he leaned in and kissed me. It wasn't a long kiss. Barely a moment, just the softest pressure of lips meeting lips. Pause in time, suspended and trembling. He pulled back immediately, eyes wide, breath caught. "I'm sorry," he whispered, voice raw. "I didn't mean to." But I hadn't moved. My hand was still in his hair, my fingers still curled gently around the edge of his jaw. My heart was thundering, and my mind screamed 100 reasons why this shouldn't happen. But my body remembered. It remembered what it felt like to be seen, to be needed, to be touched in a way that wasn't out of obligation, but of want. "I didn't mean to," he said again, softer this time, but he didn't pull away. And I didn't push him. We sat in silence, the weight of the moment settling between us like thick mist. I couldn't think clearly. I could only feel the shape of his breath, the tremor in my own hands, the memory of that kiss on my skin like the echo of something ancient and dangerous. I should have said something. But all I did was stroke his hair again, slow and steady, like he was still my boy. Like I was still his world. And I knew in that moment everything was about to change. The days that followed blurred together, strange and soft and suffocating. Nothing was said of that night. Not the kiss, not the way he had looked at me afterward, not the way I had let my hand linger on his cheek before he finally left the room. But everything had changed. It was in the way we moved around each other now, quietly, deliberately, as if some invisible thread had been tied between us and was now tugging us ever closer. "He stayed home more," said Les. His eyes carried a weight I hadn't seen before, something that clung to him even when he smiled. No. I was trying not to fall into something I didn't know how to escape. One evening it was raining. The soft kind of rain that feels like a lullaby. I was curled up on the couch in the living room, a book open in my lap but unread. The fire was low. Shadows danced on the walls. I heard his footsteps before I saw him. He always walked with a steady, quiet rhythm when he didn't want to disturb me. He stood in the doorway for a moment. "Do you want company?" he asked softly. He nodded. He sat beside me close enough that our knees touched. For a long time we didn't speak. Then quietly he said, "It's been different since that night." I didn't pretend not to know which night he meant. "Yes," I whispered. "I didn't mean to." His voice trailed off, but he didn't finish the sentence. He looked down at his hands, fingers laced together tightly. "But I don't regret it." I turned to face him slowly. "You don't?" He shook his head, then met my eyes. "Do you?" That question hung in the air between us. I didn't know how to answer. "No," I said at last. "But I don't know what it means." He exhaled, and something unspoken softened in his shoulders. "It means," he said, "that maybe we're both just two people who needed something we didn't know how to ask for." My chest tightened. It wasn't wrong, not the way he said it. Not in that moment where the world outside was all rain and wind and the room was just us. "It's not simple," I said, barely above a whisper. "No," he agreed. "But maybe it doesn't have to be." He reached out carefully and took my hand. We sat like that for a long time. Hands joined, silence folding over us like a blanket. It wasn't about words anymore. It was about breath, about presence, about the way my thumb fit against the curve of his knuckles as if it had always belonged there. That night, he didn't return to his room. He didn't ask. And I didn't tell him to leave. He fell asleep beside me on the couch, his head resting on my shoulder, his arm draped across my waist like a child seeking safety in the dark. And maybe that's all we were in that moment. Two people wrapped in an ache for something lost, something found. But when I looked down at him and saw the soft rise and fall of his chest, the way his lashes brushed his cheek, I knew that closeness like this couldn't stay hidden for long. We were already too far in. And we were only going deeper.